My name is Birgit Schmitz, and I have been working with the HDWM for 2 years now. I'm teaching with the vocational education and training aspects. That's where I started from, with the teaching in schools, and then I went to the HDWM. I have been busy with this field of game-based learning for a couple of years. Actually, I did my PhD on this, so I've been involved with this for 10 years now. And if I'm too fast speaking, or if I'm explaining something really difficult, just let me know. Just interrupt me and I will answer your questions, because from my point of view, everything is clear because I've been involved with it for so long. What we will talk about today is game-based learning. And we will explore concepts of gamification and serious games for teaching. And I will hopefully engage you in practical activities, because we have a very long session until I think 12:30, all in all, with 2 parts. And I hope that I can engage you in this issue, and we will enable, or I will enable you to identify and discuss aspects for education and for the use of games in education. And I hope that after this session, you will be able, for example, to distinguish concepts of gamification, serious games, and game-based learning, different words for very similar things. And we will identify game elements that work on a broader level, gamification frameworks, and I will show you examples in the second part. I've prepared an Etherpad for you, and I will give you the link, and we can together go to this Etherpad after the break for the second part. You have the opportunity to click on links to discover it for yourself. I will be available. I can show you things, and we can basically do it like a workshop and explore different concepts of games for learning. I want you to answer 3 questions, all in all. It's all about you and all about the behavior of how do you play. If you are playing, not many things, but 3 questions. And this is the question number 1. And what you need to do is you need to type in any device you have, mobile phone, computer. You need to type in menti.com. I will give you time for this now. And then you will be asked to type in a code. And then you automatically see this screen on your device, and you can start answering this question. And I can see people coming in. Okay. So the no is always if you have a very diffuse understanding of what I will be talking about, just interrupt me. That's no problem. I will go on with the second question. How familiar are you with game-based learning? Okay. Okay, cool. So we have experts in here, people who have already used it, and I'm really interested in your experiences. Yeah. Super. Another last question, and I will provide the results to you, Noha, in the after class, and then you can make use of it if you want to. There's one last question I have for you. And this is, I'm interested in the subjects, in the topics that you are teaching, because this is really something of vital importance for the actual games that we will look at. You can just type in the subject. It's even if the same subject has different names in our content. Okay, fine. This is actually really interesting for game-based learning. Wow, what is OS? Okay, cool. So we have some info IT people in here. Computer network, mathematics. Well, this is really, actually, if I had known this before, I would have probably gone in a more technical direction, but I think it's fine. Yeah. So this is really good. So I think we will have a common understanding of the issues that we will talk about. We're not looking into implementation details, but we will look at the look and feel. But I think even though, great, yeah. Artificial intelligence even. Okay, so I'll keep this open. You can, if you want to, in the meantime, complete this survey. I will close the session and go back to my presentation now. So if we look at game-based learning today, the reason that we will look at why and for whom can this be of interest, and how can it be done. And we did a survey like this almost 8 years ago, and you can see from this table that there was a different response with regard to, for example, age, with regard to teaching experience, and there was an almost equal distribution between male and female. It was of interest because we asked teachers in vocational education and training to tell us if they use game-based learning for their teaching. And we surveyed 151 teachers because they asked us to introduce innovative pedagogics into their teaching. And I think this is always an issue, and everybody is looking for innovation and looking for things to engage students. And in these days, it is probably getting more difficult because people have different habits in perceiving and using media. And I think the younger the pupils and the younger the students are, the more difficult it gets to involve them into teaching. Not every day and not all the time, but in general, I think you probably agree to this. And as you can see from this survey, educators have a lot of teaching experience, and the more they have experience, well, this is what it showed, the more they are prepared to use game-based learning. And also the younger the teachers were, or the vet trainers were, the more they were prepared to use game-based learning. So this is something understandable because they have a sound knowledge of their topic, and they need to have a sound knowledge of their topic in order to start something completely new. And we will have a look at the subject of game-based learning, which has been around for a very long time now. And also traditional games in education have a long-standing tradition, basically. It's nothing new. And games have always been used to be part of the human learning experience, in formal and in informal settings. You can think of very many examples where they use games in theaters, in museums, in order to get involve people and in order to transfer certain aspects, certain knowledge. And in the 21st century, there has been a rich production of digital games, and this further motivated people to use the subject for learning. Analog has been a long tradition. So game genres and gaming platforms have been developed. And this phenomenon of so-called casual games, this is probably something that you are playing or that you have played before, have been involved. And the use of play and games in education context goes basically back to the Greece and Roman Empire, because at that time already we have well-known didactics to teach mathematics, for example, well, at least examples where people tried to involve students. And in education, digital games are applied in the form of serious games, which we'll look at, to offer motivation and engagement and to provide interaction. Let's check the different definitions first before we carry on, because I think this is something that people have heard about and people talk about, but there are differences. And I think this aspect of gamification is something that you can link to the Mentimeter that you just did in a very basic way of involving people, sending out surveys, sending out small quizzes via Kahoot or via Zoom, any possibility of involving people with game-like aspects is called gamification. That's an approach where you try to motivate students, and these game mechanics can be used as motivational tools, and they are like badges, like competition, leaderboards, team quests. All these game mechanics are used in the gamification aspect. It's a non-game concept, basically, that you apply, that you use, because it only has certain elements. Gamification uses parts of a game, and if you look at the next aspect, that is game-based learning, we have some examples for this. Game-based learning is different because game-based learning is the use of games, of full games to teach knowledge, skills, and abilities. We'll have a look at serious games as well. But game-based learning is something that you in a pedagogical approach use to get people involved, to interact with people, but you need to set up something. You use a game and you produce a game, and there are tools available, which I will show you in the second part, that are very low threshold and that you can use in order to come up with nice examples. So the use of game elements as a tool for transmitting knowledge and skills, for example, in a learning process, is basically this aspect of game-based learning. And the second or the third aspect that we have is, one example would be a mobile game, Edu Caching. Maybe you know geocache. I have this example with me in the second part. And this Edu Caching, or an aspect of game-based learning, this is you produce a game for students in order to get involved with their environment. They have something on their mobile phone, and you ask them to go somewhere, pick up some information, type in the information, and then you get the next step. This is a very popular way of introducing people to university, for example, in order to get to know university. Yeah, you have 10 different spots, and then you direct people to these spots, to the library, to the what do you have, lunch, cafeteria, to the lecture rooms, and they are being guided by the mobile phone. That's you will get an example for this and the link to the tool in order to set this up later on. And these simulations or games that we use are games that aim to simulate specific aspects of reality. And sometimes, even if you look at simulations, it gets more complex. Yeah, from a very basic Kahoot quiz that you use prior to your lecture, to a mobile game that you make up with specific technology, up to a more complex simulation, a business simulation, for example. That's a game that aims to simulate management processes. They are used to train and develop skills in specific areas, for example, strategic thinking. It is very popular, and I think it is students like this a lot because they learn financial analysis, market analysis, leadership, teamwork with these simulations. Also, I have an example for this. It is a realistic and it's a controlled environment. And learners can train specific behaviors, for example, and experience the impact of decision. I think this is very popular also as an analog, non-digital way of teaching simulations. It doesn't need to be digital, but there are digital versions of analog simulations. And I think this is an interesting aspect, as especially for business education, that you are, as I saw from the survey, not involved in. But business education has a long tradition for simulations, analog simulations, in order to teach. And the last aspect, the really aspect of serious games, that's something more complex. And one of the main characteristics of serious games is the fact that instructional content is presented in a combination with interesting or entertaining elements, but they are implemented in like a game that you probably know if you think of the more complex games, video games that you can play on the PlayStation or on the Xbox. Serious games are really complex. I have no example for this or no tool for this, because this is something that you need to develop from scratch. And as I saw that you have a lot of people from the IT department, you maybe have contact, or I can direct you to people who are with game labs, and they always look for cooperations in order to really develop something for students. This is a nice idea. And if you are an IT affine department, that is probably even more supporting. But let's discuss or talk about this. So serious games are developed, and they mostly use video game technologies for primary purposes. And it's not pure entertainment like Spider-Man or whatever you play in PlayStation, but it is something that you really develop for a specific purpose. So they have well-structured prior knowledge that they integrate, and learners can build upon this knowledge, but they see the effect over time. You need to play this for a longer period, because it's not like you type in your answer in Kahoot and immediately get the response, but this is something that you develop, like how to apply specific strategies, for example. Let me see. This is something I just introduced this slide because it says the OECD has also started initiatives for innovative pedagogies for powerful learning. And I think this is nothing new to you. Gamification is one of the 6 skills or core learning strategies that they introduce. Besides blended learning, computational thinking, experiential learning, embodied learning, these aspects are being introduced in specific projects that the OECD has started. And I think I will quickly go through some aspects of theory, because this is not the main aspect that we are looking at. But I think Johan Huizinga is a very popular guy in the area of game-based learning. He's a Dutch cultural theorist, and he has influenced the game-based learning scene and game-based learning people with this book, A Study of the Play Element in Culture. And it already dates back to 1938. So his main idea is that human beings are in fundamental need of playing. And he offers notions that might help us to better understand structured play. That's all. He says we can safely assert even that human civilization has added no essential feature to the general idea of play. So he thinks that this is the only and the most solid way of really learning something, of really getting in touch with, getting involved with specific aspects. And this is also something that I want just to quickly touch, the aspect of flow. You might have heard about this, because flow is something that people usually use to argue for games, because they say that there is a specific channel between angsty and between boredom. And if you are able, as a teacher, just as like, to catch students in this small channel between angsty and between boredom, that is just enough for them to not scare them off, but to not bore them, then you are a perfect teacher, a perfect game, because you as a student will get into this flow. It's by Mihai Csikszentmihalyi. It's a very horrible word. He introduced this theory, and it is basically, it describes a state of mind. It is described by a state of deep absorption in an activity. It is intrinsically enjoyable. And like when an artist or an athlete is focused on their performance, you really get into something and you don't focus on the environment. You're just really doing something because you like it a lot and because you are flowing away. This is a very important aspect from a theory, but we skip this. I want to give you 2 or 3 examples from games that we developed. This is a game, for example, if you do healthcare, if you do medicine, we developed a mobile game in order to give people or students the opportunity to simulate cardiac arrest, sudden cardiac arrest. And we gave them this game, and they had to go and get the AD, or they had to go and get the doctor, and they had to collaborate a lot, and they had to do everything in order to reanimate this person lying on the floor. And modern students are really fully keen on and attracted by conventional or unconventional educational methods, and they really like the experience. And from the study that used this game, a mobile game, Heartron, we called it, physical navigation and role-playing and collaborative actions were involved, and they really enjoyed it, and they went through the emotional experience of an emergency situation. And this is just another picture I can show you. That results contrasted this group to a group of pupils who did not use this game, and it showed that participants who played this Heartron game held stronger beliefs in their capability to provide CPR in a case of emergency. Yeah, so they really had the feeling that they have already gone through such an experience and gone through such a process with excitement, and they felt prepared for the actual situation in real life. And also it showed that they were prepared or predicted that they would help in a case of emergency. This is another game that we used for vocational education in Germany. It is called Bauboss, like building boss. It's from the building sector. But I think as you are very far away from this section in vocational education and training, I will skip this. We developed a simulation game close to Sim. Maybe you have played this. The Sims is a very popular, still very popular game in the game sector. Why to implement games? So digital game-based learning is effective because of very, very, very many reasons. You can argue that some of them are really not possible to fulfill, but people implement games because it supports decision-making skills, because it supports social interaction. It is really motivating for learners. It is effective because it supports powerful learning strategies, situated learning. From very many studies, you can gather together aspects that really argue in favor of games, problem-solving abilities, very much even traditional games off the shelf support strategy making. I will skip the next slide because it's too detailed, but there is something that I want to show you. if you look at the aspects of why people produce, develop, and use games for learning, I think the engagement is the most obvious part. People of all ages engage with learning, they are motivated, and they really are designed, game mechanics are designed to keep players in action. Older people, younger people. I think if you have a game that people like, you can place them in a room together with a game, and they will be busy playing this game for a very long time. They are attracted to what they do for hours on end. And if they lose, they start playing all over again. This is something that we would really want our students to do as well. If they are frustrated because they don't understand it, they just go over it again and again and again, but they don't. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. But I think it is something that we really want them to do. And in games, it is the better you become, the more difficult the game gets. It is more complex. It has different and more difficult strategies, and still players keep on going and doing it. And I think as long as digital games for learning have been under discussion, people really tried to make use of these flow aspects of this engagement for the learning. So engagement is really the major part to engage them into something. But it's not, it's not only engagement, it's also voluntariness. And this is, I think, a very important aspect. Because Huizinga, the one I mentioned before, also noted that play is voluntary. People do not play because they are forced to do it. But my son plays PlayStation for 4 hours without me telling him to do so. He's just interested in it and he just does it. And students take on the challenge, or he takes on the challenge, they take it on to improve attendance and to engage. And moreover, if you note that students play because they enjoy playing, and adults only seem to do so when they are involved in some kind of ritual, because they have forgotten how to play, and they simply think, oh, that's something children do. I'm too old for this. And I think very many people are of the opinion that you are never too old for playing, and adults actually can enjoy playing as well, if only they would be daring to do so, if only they would have the guts to get involved in this issue. Safety, yes, another very important aspect is you can switch roles, for example. You can invent an alter ego. You can invent a person that you would like to be and would want to be. You can simulate and manipulate a system. You can find out what happens when you use different strategies. In games or in simulations, you get instant, immediate feedback, but you have no real-life results. This way, games can create a space where players can feel safely without any real material or cost or any danger or any injuries. You can try out things in a safe environment over and over again, and you put yourself into someone else's shoes, which means this is a growing aspect of empathy, because you can really try and see a specific situation out of somebody else's stance, out of somebody else's point of view. And yes, this is, I think, is another very important aspect. Sometimes it's just satisfaction to have overcome an obstacle and to be capable of doing something and to be able to win. And I think this is something that you really strive for, that you want to do, and you want to be successful. And this is why you keep going until the very end. This, I think I will skip because I believe that you are aware of this. The aspect that increasingly the set of competencies that you as teachers try to teach and try to transmit and try to train your students is getting more abstract and at the same time more complex. And these 4 C's, the 21st century skills, have been under discussion from OECD, from the European Union. This is at least what I'm aware of. increasingly, because people or our students will have to work and will have to survive basically in a very different world and with a very different set of competencies. It is slowly, but I think in our context, I think Corona was the first sign that gives you an understanding of how volatile and how uncertain the future has become. And I think aspects like critical thinking, problem solving, be creative, have started to become a very large aspect of education. And if you have been watching education and classrooms in the past year, you are probably aware that the rapid advancement of educational technology and basically the increasing centrality of these aspects, like we have service economy, everything is focused on technology and on profit and on rather being a very efficient society. This has prompted a reorientation for educators and for educational institutions worldwide. And for example, the aspect of collaboration, I think I can't mark this on the upper right side, can give you an understanding why games, or how can games support this. A game that fosters critical thinking, or a game that fosters collaboration, because play is often and best experienced when you are in a group, and the type of play that makes place in a learning game is no exception. So whether the game is a single player or a multiplayer, it doesn't matter, but you have to somehow collaborate with people. You have to, collaboration serves various purposes in order to be quicker in the game or in order to reach your goal. And players can use learning games in pairs or in small groups. They need to exchange opinions. They need to exchange possible strategies. They need to solve problems together. And this way they are training a kind of collaborative work style that basically typifies a modern workplace in which they will have to specialize in their future. I have an example for a collaborative game as well. It's in the Etherpad that I will show you in a minute. This video Radix trailer is from the MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology in Boston. I have information on this as well, so you can have a look at the trailer and try to get an understanding of how games can support these aspects of collaboration. And I think the who, I want to quickly go through this but I think you know your students just as well, and you know how they behave, and you know probably also that what they are doing, and that they nowadays are increasingly or significantly influenced by digital tools, by digital devices, and then they are really in the need of constantly handing digital information. This is very different to my situation. I'm 50 now, and I grew up in the world before the internet was invented, basically. I wrote my first email when I was at university, but I think for the nowadays students, everything is basically, they've never experienced a world without the internet, never ever. And sometimes these new students of today were called digital natives. But I think for very many students, this is not the case, because they are capable of dealing with the smartphone, and they know how to send chat messages and to whatever, get any information, but they are not capable of really using it for productive and for creative aspects, or they probably not even use it for learning. They just play with it, and it's a very mighty tool that they have in their hand, and some people simply use it for very basic tasks. Basically, you could do a lot more with your smartphone. But in this slide, you see that boys play more than girls. Probably, I don't know why, there are no reasons. Boys play more video games than girls. So if you have male students, it is probably something that they will fancy. Also, it discriminates age, and it shows that there are some differences with regard to age, but I think the main difference is with regard to sex or to gender, that boys in the studies from Pew Research Center in the States, these were the numbers that I have, and from a German institute that also researches youth media behavior. It frequently shows that boys are more prone to playing video games or to games in general than girls, whatever the reason. They do not always explain this. And they are playing puzzle games, strategy games. Strategy games are more complex. Adventure games, unfortunately, but yes, they also have shooters, role-playing, but they also have team support or racing and simulations. And the puzzle game, can you think of what a puzzle game would be? What you probably play this in the, sometimes if you have a spare minute after lunch by yourself, is Tetris, basically. Tetris, or any game that you use where you have to sample specific elements together. The frequency, yeah, since 2007, when Apple introduced the iPhone, it's only been 14 years that the world has changed completely and has become mobile and online constantly. It was only in 2007, and when access to the internet has become mobile and thus a worldwide phenomenon. And the numbers you see here, they are only from 2014, and already it shows that youngsters are online every day, and 92% and 80% of teens are online at least several times a day. Well, these are the numbers from 7 years ago. I think by now everything would be 100. This is something I want to show you, not to scare you, but I think it needs to complete the picture. Horizon 2020, the EduCourse report, is a report that is frequently provided to universities or all educational institutions, states that the aspect of artificial intelligence is already being used as part of educational services worldwide, and also as part of curriculum design. And I think the people in our group that are involved with artificial intelligence, because I saw that you are teaching this, they can probably give us examples of how far you are using AI in education. But the Horizon 2020 report also states that a public school district that AI will be used, but only in about 10 years on a very general level for education. But it may also have implications for refining language translation, for improving access. Also, you can use it for, if you want to repair a car, you use your Oculus Rift, and you have tools where you can simulate how to take off a wheel and how to repair something, or how to, for physics and for chemistry, there are very many applications already on how to use AI for learning. Also for medicine, you can simulate, if you use the Oculus Rift, the inside of a body, and you can indicate where's the heart and where is the liver, and you can really have a better visual image of the insides of a body, if you feel like you want to see this. Some people, and I can understand this perfectly fine, don't want to do this. But mixed reality or artificial reality will impact learning game space more than any other emerging game technology, but not until 2030. This is what the EduCourse report states.